Welcome to the final video about the PSAT number 2 review problems. Tonight what we're going to discuss is a bit of how to apply the critical reading method, grammar, concepts, and some easy ways that we can look at the math problems. Let's get started. This passage is adapted from Mark Saluka, Brewster, a novel, 2013. So what we discussed in a different video was how to organize the passage into manageable pieces. Given that we always want to read the intro to the passage first, our second step is to go through the passage and organize it into manageable pieces. So then that way, you're never taking on too much content and getting overwhelmed. So all I'm doing right now is organizing my passage into manageable pieces. The first passage is always fiction or literary narrative, and then followed by nonfiction passages in economics, social sciences, psychology, women's history, American history, government, and the like. All right, so let's get started with Mark Saluka's passage. This was a time trial, he said. A 1-mile time trial, 4 laps, not a race. It was meant to give an idea of where we stood, no more. We gathered around the middle of the long side of the track, just 10 or 12 of us, including 3 others, who seemed new like me, jogging back and forth in the wind, loosening up. The rest had walked over to the other side of the field. Falvo took me aside. Warmed up? How are the shoes? So my first annotation for this segment would be time trial. Fine. In the distance, I could see kids walking toward the parking lot. The sun stabbed out from under the clouds, glancing off the wooden windshields. He raised his voice over the wind. All right, I want you to stay contained. Stay smooth. I don't see anybody draining the well today. That means you, Mr. McCann. A tall, tough-looking kid with red hair and a tight face smiled like a gunslinger. He turned to me. I don't want you doing anything stupid, Mosher. Some of these boys have been at it for a while. Don't think about them. Think about yourself. So, coach's advice. And I would also circle Mosher as he is the narrator. And at this point, we also know who Falvo is. He's the coach. I shrugged. Pace yourself. Let them do what they do. They'll be about 30 yards ahead after the first lap. Don't worry about them. Go out. Go out slow. Feel your way. Then bring it home as best you can, okay? Sure, I said. Remember, it's a time trial, not a race. So here, I would actually break it up as well and just write down star next to time trial, so we have to keep reminding himself of that. There was no starting gun. We lined up in the gusty wind, Falvo standing in the soggy infield in his dress shoes, holding his clipboard like a small high table against his chest, with his left hand and his stopwatch in his right. And then he barked, runners, marks, go. So there I would just write start. They didn't run, they flowed. The kid in the headband, the red-headed kid, and 2 or 3 others in particular with a quiet, aggressive, sustained power that looked like nothing, but felt like murder. And I was with them. And then halfway through the third turn, they were moving away, smooth as water, and I could hear them talking among themselves. And I was slowing, burning, leaning back like there was a rope around my neck. Too fast, Mosher, too fast, I heard Falvo yelling. And his axe-sharp face came out of nowhere looking almost frantic, and then it was gone. And there was just the sound of my breathing and the crunch of my sneakers slapping the dirt. The group, still in a tight cluster, wasn't all that far ahead of me. So there, keeping up, too fast, others ahead. By the end of the second lap, I heard someone far away yelling, "Stop, Mosher, that's enough." And then at some point, someone else calling, coming through, inside, and they passed me like a single mass, all business now. And I remember staggering after them, gasping, drowning, my chest, my legs, my throat filling with lead, and looking up through a fog of pain just in time to see the kid with the headband halfway down the backstretch, accelerating into a sustained, powerful sprint. Here, write down lapped and hurting. I don't know why. I can't explain it. By the end of the third lap, I was barely moving, clawing at the air, oblivious to everything except the dirt unfolding endlessly in front of me. Let him go, I heard somebody say. They'd all finished by then, recovered, and now stood watching as I staggered past them, like something shot. Come on. I heard someone start to call out uneasily, and then, what's his name? A small crowd, I found out later, sensing something going on, had gathered by the fence of the parking lot. The last of the newcomers had passed me long ago. So group cheering. I remember seeing him appear in front of me, like I was coming up from underwater and trying to swerve, but I was barely standing, and I walked right into him, and he caught me as I fell, his one good arm around my back, saying over and over, "All right, easy now. Easy, you're done. Keep walking. Walk it off." Like he was gentling a horse. I threw up on the infield grass. "What we have here," he was saying, "is failure to communicate. Stay within yourself," I said. "Don't drain the well," I said. So, ran too fast, foggy, and now we're about to get into the coach's warning came true for the last part here. What did I get? I couldn't seem to hold my head up or open my eyes. The pain kept coming in waves. What? Time? What time did I get? He laughed. That bitter Falvo laugh. Ha! Like he had just been vindicated. He wants to know what he got, he said, like there was somebody with us. You want to know what you got? I'll tell you what you got. Proof you could beat yourself senseless. Something I very much doubt you needed. So coach's warning came true. All right, so now let's look at the questions. Based on the passage, which character would most likely agree with the idea that when trying something new, it's best not to push one's limits? The coach. And who's the coach? Falvo. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answers to the previous question? So remember, who's going to say it's not best to push one's limits? Now remember, he's warning Moshe, the new guy. 14 to 17 says, he raised his voice over the wind. All right, I want you all to stay contained, stay smooth. I don't want to see anybody draining the well today. But that's not something new. That's about the guys who've all been running for a while. So that one's wrong. Oops. 19 to 22, he turned to me. I don't want you doing anything stupid, Moshe. Some of these boys have been at it for a while. Don't think about them, think about yourself. That's it. Because now he's giving Moshe, who's doing this for the first time, some ideas about how to approach it. We can keep reading 55 to 60 and see if that fits, but that's when Moshe's getting passed on the track, so that's not it. And then 76 to 79 is when he fell into Falvo's arms at the end of the race. In the context of Falvo's instructions to the runners, the main purpose of lines 24 to 27 is to do what? Pace yourself. Let them do what they do. They'll be about 30 yards ahead after the first lap. Don't worry about them. Go out slow, feel your way, then bring it home as best you can. That's his advice to Moshe. So it's not a philosophy applicable to sports and life. That's just too big of an idea. And he's not explaining to the group. And he's not underlying Falvo's motivation. I would say B, emphasize and elaborate on advice given earlier, specifically to Moshe. All right, let's take a look at the other questions. In the context of the passage, I shrugged and said, sure, mainly show the narrator's, he's not being shy, he's not being dishonest, and he's not hostile. He's just dismissive, like, all right, I'll follow your ideas. Based on the passage, how the experienced runners respond to Falvo's advice? For the most part, they followed it, right? They kept together, they ran their race. They didn't pretend. They didn't act like they hadn't heard it. And they didn't enthusiastically embrace it. I'd say C, they generally accepted it. What does the narrator say about his motivation for performing as he did in the time trial? You actually go back and it says, I don't know why, I can't explain it. So when we look here, if we take a look at the options, he was determined to keep up with the other runners. I don't think there was any determination. He didn't say what he wanted to prove to himself. And there wasn't a previous time mentioned. D is your best option because he doesn't know why. And If you go back to the lines here, I don't know why, I can't explain it. That's line 61. So for number 7, line 61 is going to be your best support. And in line 89, let me go to number 8, sorry. Based on the passage, when Falvo says, don't drain the well, he means don't use up all your energy. Like, don't sprint. It's not outdoing one another. Sometimes you get sick, but and don't quit before you're finished. That's not what he's saying. And vindicated, he felt right at the end of this because he was found to be true, that his advice was the right advice. He was proven right. Avenged is too extreme, and there wasn't really a defense, and he wasn't free of anything, but he was proven right that Moshe should have really listened to him. So in terms of the reading, the best thing that you can do is to really break it down, think of an answer, get it down on paper, and then get rid of the words or phrases to prove that the statement is false. Moving into grammar, best thing to do here is to really listen for the context. So you're going to test each option completely back into the sentence, make your selection, and then use it to continue reading on. So for the love of coffee, they're always going to give you some sort of title before the 11 questions that correspond. Ever since introducing coffee to Italy several centuries ago, it has been a ubiquitous part of Italian culture. Sounds a little awkward, doesn't it? Ever since they introduced coffee, who's they? That doesn't make sense. Ever since their introduction of coffee to Italy several centuries ago, it has been a ubiquitous part of Italian culture. I think you're talking about the Italian people, but again, it's awkward. Ever since coffee was introduced to Italy several centuries ago, it has been a ubiquitous part of Italian culture. Better. The best way to deal with any sort of transition word or phrase is to read the sentence prior, skip the word or phrase in question, and keep reading, because that'll give you as if it's cause and effect, adding to a list, or summing something up. Ever since coffee was introduced to Italy several centuries ago, it has been a ubiquitous or widespread part of Italian culture. Coffee is so central to Italian culture that one cannot visit any city or town in Italy without seeing several coffee houses. I would say you're explaining this even further. So it's not an opposite word, and it's not a despite, and it's not even so. I would say, in fact, coffee is so central to Italian culture that one cannot visit any city or town in Italy without seeing several coffee houses. Definitely makes sense. Such coffee houses have existed since 1640, when the first was established in Venice. And, let's see, coffee houses have existed. And it has, I know I need something that's plural because we're talking about coffee houses. It is singular. It is singular. And are they past tense or is it present? And let's look here. Such coffee houses have existed since 1640, when the first was established in Venice, and they have since become a part of Italy's national identity. Or such coffee houses have existed since 1640, when the first was established in Venice, and they had since become, it's clunky and awkward, right? So they have since, plural. All right, number 4. So we don't want to skip anything between the two because we want to see what's going on here to connect them together. So there's a lot of main idea questions, so you don't want to skip that at all. It is not uncommon in Italy for people to make 2 to 3 trips a day to their favorite cafeteria. And often people are so selective about their coffee that they will frequent only one establishment. But it is not simply the coffee that creates such enthusiasm for coffee houses among those which love them, among those who loves them, among those who love them, among those whom love them. Definitely who. Definitely a subject. Not whom, which would be an object. It's not loves, and it's not which, watch your witches. It's who love them. Each cafeteria functions as a social hub in its neighborhood, and the way in which most patrons consume their coffee contribute to this fact, and the way in which most patrons consume their coffee contributes to this fact, and the way in which most patrons contributing to this fact, and the way in which patrons consume their coffee, which contributes to this fact. So what sounds best here for number 5? I would say each cafeteria functions as a social hub in its neighborhood, and the way in which most patrons consume their coffee contributes to this fact. So B. So you can see here that it's a lot based on context. So the more context you read, the better it will go. And the same for sentence 6, which is based on context as you're giving another example of what's made, so paying attention here. And here, when you're combining underlined sentences, my best piece of advice is that if they still offer a combination with a semicolon, that's not actually combining it at all. So you definitely want to try to do your best to combine your sentences together without a semicolon. So A for 7 is your best option. And be careful if they repeat options as well, correct and proper. How about just correct? We don't need to say things more than once. So 9 is going to be A. And watch out for punctuation as well. So like for number 10, an espresso mixed with frosted and steamed milk is a cappuccino. For example, while an espresso with just a dollop of steamed milk on top is a cafe macchiato. Now there, it's a bit awkward to have a piece of punctuation after cappuccino because you're connecting the example to cappuccino. So I would imagine that if you're going to have a colon and then, for example, and then this list, it doesn't make sense. So A and B are out as a result. So then looking at C, you sort of have this mix of punctuation between commas, and that comma after is really awkward, and a dash. Or if you have the for example as an independent clause, then you can read around it. An espresso mixed with frothed and steamed milk is a cappuccino, while an espresso with just a dollop of steamed milk on the top is a cafe macchiato. So that's where you're coming up with the commas using as an independent clause, and then you can cut that out and read the sentence with it, without it in there. Which takes us to math. So math is the last portion of what we're going to discuss tonight. So what I did, I went through all the problems in the first 20 questions of math without a calculator, and I gave you hints on what to do for each of them. So 1 to 4 are the easy questions. 5 through 8 are the medium, and 9, 10, 11 are the hard questions. 9 through 13 are the hard questions. As you go back to the easy questions and build to the hard questions for 14 to 17. So going back here, so which of the following is an equivalent form of the expression 15x plus 24ax? So equivalent means same. So what we want to try to do is find something that we can factor out. Now I can't find a common term here between 15 and 24. I guess 3, but that's the only thing, and they're not offering that as an example. All right, so then x is my only other factor. So x is going to be my best example here. So for number 1, 15 plus 24a, and quantity of that times x is going to be my best factor. So best factor for that one is going to be D. Now here, the formula distance equals rate times time is used to calculate the distance an object travels over a period of time, t, at a constant rate r. Based on the formula, what is the rate r in terms of d and t? So you want to get r by itself. Currently, it's getting multiplied by t. So what's the opposite of multiplication? Division. So you're going to divide t over to the other side, and you'll wind up with r equals d divided by t. So your answer there is A. Which of the following ordered pairs satisfies both equations? So you can substitute in for x or y, or test out your answers into equations above. So this is probably the easier equation to plug into, x equals y minus 4. So we can try that. So let's plug in -4 minus 4. That should get us 0. Not for A. 6 minus 4. That gets us 2. 14 minus 4, not 3. 9 minus 4 gets us 5. Okay. So now let's see if we get our answer for 2 or 5 based on plugging in for x. 2 squared is 4. 3 times 2 is 6. 4 plus 6 is 10. 10 minus 4 is 6. That works. 5 squared is 25. 3 times 5 is 15. Minus 4, already it's too big to get our y. So we know B must be our answer for 3. For 4, we're going to combine terms and solve. So I'm going to move my 2x squared over. So 3x squared minus 2x squared is simply x squared. And then I'm going to move the 4x over. So I'll have x squared minus 4x plus 3. So when I factor these terms, because now I have a quadratic expression, I would have x squared minus 4x plus 3. So I'm going to get the factors of x minus 3 times x minus 1. So when you have x minus 3, sorry for my limping along here, x minus 3, set that equal to 0 and solve for x. So what's my value for x? It must be 3. That's the only one that's going to make sense. All right, when you have systems of equations, eliminating your term is one of the best options. So what I would do is multiply the first expression by 10, and then I would multiply the second expression by -4, because you want your y's to go away. And so by doing systems of equations elimination, I can then solve for my x. And my best value for the answer for x is going to be C, which is -4 once you work that out. Number 6, the equation y equals 36 plus 18x models the relationship between the height y inches of a typical golden delicious apple tree and the number of years, x, after it was planted. If the equation is graphed in the xy plane, what is indicated by the y-intercept of the graph? Well, first of all, it's written backwards. I like that shouldn't be y minus, that should be y equals mx plus b form. And see what it stands for. So my slope is 18, and my y-intercept is 36. So I would imagine my y-intercept of the graph is going to be what? Let's look. Is that going to be the starting height, and then it grows by this height every year? That's what would make the most sense to me. So B is going to be the height in inches of a typical apple tree when it's planted. Because you can't start from 0, it has to be something. Otherwise, the apple tree wouldn't grow. All right, number 7. Here, when you have tax added to something, it's 100 plus whatever the percent tax is. So it's going to be 1.08 times the value. So if Giovanni is going to buy shirts that are $19.40 a piece and sweaters that are $24.80 with a sales tax of 8%, and he wants to buy 2 shirts, well, 1940 times 2 is 38.80. So given that's the case, plus your sweater, one sweater, $24.80, times the number of sweaters purchased, which is P, times your sales tax, which is 1.08, that'll get you his total purchase price. All the others really don't make sense because the 1.8 is on the wrong side over here. You're not taking anything away. And why would we be multiplying that times y? You need to find your total purchase price. So my little rhyme, when in doubt, draw it out. A line is graphed in the xy plane. If the line has a positive slope and a negative y-intercept, which of the following points cannot lie on the line? So it could be a line that goes through here or here or here. So -3, -3, that could work. -3, 3, that really wouldn't work because where is that going to have a negative y-intercept? +3, -3, that could work. +3, +3, that could still have a negative y-intercept. So I would imagine this is going to be your answer because if your point is out here, you're never going to have a negative y-intercept. So take a second and look at some of the rules that I'm giving you as you're going through each of these. And I realize here AC, when we look at that, it's not necessarily the hypotenuse of ABC. What they're saying is with AB over BC is that you have a leg and then you have the short leg of the big triangle. So I realize it's actually not the hypotenuse of ABC, it's the short leg of the hypotenuse. So your best one is going to be BD, which is your long leg, over DC, which is your short leg, because we're comparing the big triangle with its long leg and short leg to the smaller triangle, which is a similar triangle inside of BD over DC. So that's our best answer for 11. So again, just take a second and look at the different examples that are here to help you. And you can pause through each of these and then go to the last page of your PSAT packet to see what the answer choices would be. One final piece of advice is that you cannot have a mixed number. You'll notice here, if you grid in 3.5, it'll look like 31 over 2, which is wrong. So be careful. It should be either a grid in as 3.5 or 7 over 2. And you can never have a negative answer. No question has a negative answer because it's either a decimal, fraction, 0, or greater. Best of luck on the PSAT.